Okay. Again, pleasant good afternoon. I have a few persons who are now online, and I will continue to admit participants as they come in. But thank you to those of you who have decided that you wanted to come on and join in today's masterclass. Just to clarify, there will be a pre-recorded pre-recording for this masterclass, but I always like when I have created the opportunity for persons to have a space where we can dialogue, we can exchange, we can discuss, and if they wanted to ask questions or seek clarification, the masterclass allows for that to happen. But just be mindful that there is going to be a pre-recorded session. So if there are colleagues who were not able to make it, they can refer to it. If you are not going to be able to be here for the entirety of today's session, you will be able to go back to the recording at your own leisure and be able to review, listen, download. And also you have the modules 3 and 4, which has been opened up onto the school platform, and you will be also able to interact with the contents there. So again, by way of introduction, I want to believe I have met the majority of you who are on today's call, but my name is Natasha Yiloy Labad, and I am one of the principal consultants at Outsource Development. And over the past 4 days, I have been having an exciting time with the NCCU team and discussing member service excellence, and we have had units or modules 1 and 2, where we looked at understanding member service excellence and mastery of communication, and just looking at some of the communication models and frameworks that you can really use to support the NCCU in their MSc initiative. But I think even deeper than that, support your career as a service professional. And if I'm quite honest, the intention is to accelerate and be successful in our career. And so this masterclass, I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to be very conversational, and I'm actually going to share with you very candidly some of the things that I think is really critical as you begin to look at the content for module 3 and 4, which focuses on professionalism, and how that can lead to member satisfaction, and maybe think about the art of satisfaction, if I can use that word art, when it comes to interacting with customers. But I think even at a deeper level, to think about how do we build relationships. And because for all of us, and particularly because the reason why we're on this platform is the focus is professional relationships, I think it's always really good to talk about the bigger picture in terms of what is the purpose of our professional relationships, and understanding the dynamics of your personal relationship as opposed to your professional relationship with a colleague is really important, because sometimes we can become distracted and misconstrue or misalign or misposition ourselves within those relationships. And that can be quite detrimental for someone who your intention is to either go into leadership, your intention is to perhaps maybe take on more responsibility, your intention is to, basically get a promotion, or, you want to be able to, you want a little more out of your professional career. And so for you need to be very strategic from the very start of every professional relationship that you have. You really need to begin very early on to position yourself within that, within the constraints of your professional relationship. So I will talk a little bit about some of these elements, but it will be more conversational, and that will allow me to share more openly with you in this forum, because what I want to be able to do is get you to see that one of the things that you need as a service professional is to have that self-awareness. So I remember when my last, I would say, formal employee-employer relationship where I was paid based on my time. And I basically had that, commitment to be somewhere from 8 to 4, sometimes 9 to 5, sometimes it would be 10-hour shifts. But the dynamics of the relationship that I have now and that I had back then was different. And I remember feeling once that I was very, very close to one of my senior managers. And that closeness meant that there were sometimes situations where I could remain in a room and sit at the table with very high profile individuals because I had built up a very strong relationship with this senior manager. And also because there were elements of trust. Obviously, because of the nature of my role, there were some things that I was required to do at a very senior level, which meant that this senior manager, relied on me. And I remember there was a situation that, occurred where I was asked for feedback on something that had happened, and I gave my honest, on on edited, not professionally scripted feedback on what I observed. And, in hindsight, sometimes when we are learning and growing, we don't always realize that, while we are equals, our roles are different. So in that scenario, the feedback I was giving was about another senior manager. And that senior manager had lots of history with this person that I thought I was very close to. Long and short, while they listened to my feedback, later I realized that some of the feedback that I had been given was shared with the other senior manager. And it made for a very, very uncomfortable situation. And that taught me that sometimes what can happen to us in our professional, how we present ourselves and how we show up within our professional places of work or where we work, we can mix and muddle up our professional and personal relationships. And while I may have had some kind of, I may have had some kind of deposits in that individual's bank, there's always someone that may have more deposits or a closer, stronger relationship with you. And so what I want to do is, as I speak to you today and share with you, and encourage you to ask questions and to also share, is to share with you behind the psychology, of relationships, and also an understanding of, what are some of the signals of professionalism that can really impact you as a service professional, impact the way that you see your role and the way that you approach, how you show up as a service professional. And you will know, based on what I am saying, that everybody have a best friend or a bestie friend than you. So in that circumstance, I didn't recognize that I was not on the same level. Yes? While I may have been a trusted confidant, while I may have been really good at what I did, but there are some levels that you are not on. And I really want you to understand in your professional space that Sometimes your level and your circumstance is not the same. I'm not speaking about your circumstance. Your circumstance might be that you are entry, level, very new to the organization, just trying to feel out and understand the culture, trying to recognize the dynamics of relationships. That's a circumstance. Or you might be new to the world of work, you're just coming in, so you need to understand, how do you show up professionally on a budget? Yeah, that's a circumstance. That's not the same as level. And so I really want you to be mindful that our levels within our organizational structure, or roles within our organizational structure is different, but the etiquettes of how do we navigate professionalism should not change. So I often like to tell these little stories because these stories, while at the time it was very uncomfortable because this person, while we were not as close as myself and my senior manager, we did have a good relationship, and I felt like that totally sort of just made for a very uncomfortable situation within the office setting. And while I never confronted the individual, I just took stock and readjusted my, communication style, and basically how I chose to give feedback, whether it was solicited or unsolicited feedback. And so when I within the module of the psychology of relationship building, that's one of the things that I really want to encourage you to think about. When you are within the office setting, when you are within a work setting, there are some expectations of a professional work environment, and that is very different from a personal relationship outside of a professional setting or outside of a work setting. And even if you may have a personal relationship with someone, always be mindful that once you are in a professional setting, the culture and the rules of engagement within that professional setting will hold, firm. So at this point, I want to pause. Perhaps maybe someone may have just joined and wondering what I missed the Beth, what's that story time about? Or perhaps maybe there's some questions that you may have that you wanted to ask or seek clarification on. So I'll allow you to do that before I kind of move into my conversations on some of the lessons under Module 3, Problem Solving and Member Satisfaction, and then I'll move on to the psychology of relationships. Any questions at this time? Any questions? And I'm also curious, have there been situations like this that you've experienced where perhaps maybe, you ended up in a situation where you are in a professional setting and, something has happened and you're like, man, if I knew, I would not have done, I would not have said, I would not have gone, I would not have. Yeah. Okay, so our first sort of a stop on the lessons under looking at problem solving and member satisfaction is really the consideration of, what are some of the signals of professionalism? And basically, because professionalism is, you would say, the base or the stage that all interactions with your customers sort of based on, especially because it's not just about your financial expertise or your know-how. Some of you may know the drill and you may know your service environment very well. You may know who is responsible for what. You may be very good at being able to make recommendations for staff, for customers in terms of what solutions are best available to address their problems. But there are other things that, can really impact, that feeling of satisfaction. And I think professionalism is the very beginning of that. So things like respect, courteous, and basically having a posture and a mindset for service. Now, there are times when I know that you have gone into service interactions and you have seen persons who have given you signals of unprofessionalism, or they've given you signals that they're not ready to sort of go that service journey with you. Are there examples of or situations that you can remember where you have been able to pick out certain signals that service professionals who are in a front-facing role are giving that does not meet your expectation of professionalism? And I know that we have all been on the receiving end, whether it be that someone is talking on the phone when we walk in, or if it's a situation where you are trying to engage with someone and there's no active engagement or no active listening. Perhaps maybe that person is running late, or that person seems not prepared. So you made a booking and you turn up and they're not yet prepared for you. Or is it that you have asked for, again, some kind of personalization? Perhaps you said, I don't want fries, or I don't want onions in my burger. All of these things, all of these examples I've given are basically signals that service professionals can give when they are in a front-facing role. And that's why I really want to encourage you, as you think about your role as a service professional, and as you think about the signals of professionalism, think about what those things can be. So reflect on that a little bit. Think of a time when your professionalism helped you turn around a situation. Are there examples of some challenges that you can give that you would like to, share with us, that would be something that you would believe would be a strategy that you have used to sort of maintain your professionalism in interacting with a customer? Is there someone who would like to share an example with us? Any examples to share? No examples that come to mind? So on our discussion prompts, there will be an opportunity for you to be able to reflect on that. But I ask because what I want you to always be able to do is to personalize these discussions to the interactions that we're having and the conversations that we're having. Albert, I saw you unmuted. Please, if you were about to share, please don't be shy. I don't know if that was an error. Did I imagine that? Okay, it appeared that someone was about to share. I thought it was Albert. I saw something go on mute, and then I see it's mute again. So no, so I'm saying that I want you to be able to share from the perspective of your experiences within the discussion prompt. So I'm going to highlight that, because that is within the third module as we talk about member service, member satisfaction and problem solving. There is a discussion prompt for sharing an example. The other thing that I want to highlight is confidence, and that came up yesterday. I'm utilizing the challenges that we have and turning those into, opportunities to be able to reassure our customers. I think more than anything in a service environment, one of the things that customers want to be able to do is feel sort of reassured or feel heard, particularly when they may have addressed concerns with you or brought concerns to your attention. They really expect your guidance, and they want that you will be in the know. And quite frankly, there might be situations or certain circumstances where you might not necessarily be in the know. So here's one thing that, I want to ask. How are you able to project your confidence when you might quite possibly not be in the know? One of the things is speaking clearly and assertively and being very intentional about trying not to get our customers lost in the financial lingo. um, Being very positive in our speaking style and the language that we use, emphasizing the solutions as opposed to the limitations. And if we're not careful, because of many of us, how we have been socialized, we can actually default to a negative speaking pattern. So that might lead us sometimes, especially if we're under pressure, to, when we respond first to a limitation. So I want you to sort of be thinking about how you can reframe your perspective every time somebody brings you a problem, or every time somebody brings you a challenge, or every time someone gives you a feedback. Try to pull to the forefront of your mind what is the solution, and respond with the solution in mind. And that can help you to sort of reduce, the use of negative language styles. The other thing is, of course, showing conviction that the recommendation that you're providing is, something that the member can rely on. And I think one of the things that happens when we speak and we have conversations, many of us, especially if we feel that we are unsure, we can sort of use the upswing at the end of our conversations, and that might make it seem like we are asking a question. So when I just spoke, right there, I used an upswing. So I said, my name is Natasha Yiloy Labad, and there's a question at the end of Labad. So that might make it seem that I'm unsure, or I'm asking a question. And that can happen very often when we're speaking to something and we may feel like we don't know as much. So in addition to, of course, spending time to actually gain confidence, practicing some of the regular challenges that may come up, I think one of the best things that you can do is practicing your speaking patterns and using prompts, so that instead of saying things like, I don't know, you can actually say things like, let me find out what the best answer is for you, because that's something that's quite interesting. And I actually haven't dealt with that directly myself, but I do have a colleague who works with that, and I can reach out to them. So just bear with me. So it's practicing how do we solve those problems, and doing that with confidence. And I want you to relate that not just to dealing with a external customer, but also internal customers sometimes, because we're used to each other. There's the saying, familiarity breeds contempt. And I don't know why that is. And that's why I encourage persons within their professional relationships to take time, like court your professional relationships. Don't just jump in right away and be all crazy with each other. No, take time to, understand someone and show that person these are your core values. This is the way that you would prefer to be addressed or spoken to. Take time to build that trust and that engagement with your internal customer the same way that you would with external customers, because oftentimes we can be a little bit mean or uncouth and unprofessional because we think we are sort of connecting with an internal customer. I spent a lot of time talking about knowing your drill and how product knowledge really allows you to be able to tailor recommendations to customer offers and to be a little bit more proactive when you are anticipating member needs. You can do that same thing with your internal customers. So if staff keep saying, oh my God, this problem keeps popping up when you're working IT, it might be a cue for you to find out how can we solve this problem. Or, there's something happening within the operational flow of, certain processes, and the feedback keep getting, shared. You want to really be able to spend time to get as much information as to how that can be solved, and then share that information. And there are some strategies that really can strengthen your understanding and knowledge. The biggest one is doing research, and staying up to date, not just with credit union products and services and policy changes that's happening within the organization, but also career-wise. Some of us, we can be very sort of put an X on certain things that we are not interested in. And while I'm not saying that you have to jump on every single trend and purchase a course for every new thing that comes up, what I also want you to be mindful of is not becoming that person that becomes like a digital dinosaur or any other type of dinosaur within your organization, or just within, the larger scheme of yourself as a professional. Ask challenging questions and seek clarification. This is a really good strategy for staying on top of knowing your drill. Understanding what benefits for you and also for the persons that you're serving can really help with they knowing the drill, because while it's really great that you know the products and you know the services, at the end of the day, you're not necessarily going to be the one that is buying the products and services of your business or your credit union. Yes, it's someone else. So again, you need to be able to transition to sharing that knowledge and sharing the drill with others. And solving problems is really supposed to be an opportunity for us to, understand what the needs of our clients and customers are, even if they are internal customers. Effective communication, turning those conversations around. I mean, sometimes we have to have fierce conversations. And let me pause because someone is asking me if there's supposed to be. No, Melissa, there isn't, because you're going to have a pre-recorded, which will be a presentation screen. So this is really just engagement and just going through the content. So you're pretty much, we're pretty much having more of a masterclass session where we can have answering questions and being able to have an exchange. But thank you for asking. No, you're not going to see a beautiful a PowerPoint on our Zoom. Yeah. Okay, so some of the elements of communication, which is part of professionalism. I have interacted with quite a few service professionals. Some of you have actually interacted with in a professional setting within the credit union space. And while you're very good at sharing your knowledge and sharing the services and sharing the products, one of the things that you must continually be passionate about is knowing how to have frictionless, effective communication. And one of the best ways that we do that is we learn to do that from the normal work that we do. So every experience is an opportunity to practice active listening, paying attention to the actual verbal and non-verbal cues of customers. And if you're not actively listening, you can lose those verbal cues, and you can lose the cues that you get from the body language, whether you're getting frustration or whether you're getting sadness or whether you're getting, whatever it is. You need to actively listen. And when customers are, depending on the state of mind of your customer, they can be distracting to you in the conversation. So that's why active listening is really key. So if you are that person, and some of you have a tendency to teleport to a different location, space and time when you're having fierce conversations. If you are someone like that, you're really going to have to practice paying attention to, the information, the cues that your customers are sharing. And that's something that is very key, because when you get lost, what happens usually, it's because you are doing that as a mechanism for protecting yourself and maybe sometimes to protecting the customer. But that can end up being very frustrating, because then what happens, because you were not listening, the customer might have to give you certain vital pieces of information again. And that's one of the things that can really cause, conflicts in communication. So effectively actively listening is one of the key elements of effective communication. Exercising that empathy button and pressing that empathy button and that reassurance button is about sort of acknowledging. Now, you can feel sorry for someone and you can feel empathy for someone. You can feel pity, sorry for someone. You feel sorry for them. And then you can feel empathy for someone while you may or may not disagree or agree with the approach that they're taking or what they're sharing with you. You might just be able to put yourself in their shoes and be able to understand how the situation that they're in could be leading to frustration. And while pity is different from empathy, I think the focus in that situation is always to reassure and acknowledge. And it's really not about trying to figure out right or wrong, but really more of an acknowledgement of this is what's happening. And then again, going back to that positive language is that framing, because many of us kind of can get lost in the framing where we start with the problem as opposed to instead highlighting some of the solutions that you were able to pick out while you were actively listening. And body language and tone. A warm smile, steady eye contact, a calm voice. Yes, these are great, but there are other signals of professionalism. Some of us are still using our nose and our head, yes, as part of our body language. And for some of us, it's normal. I've been speaking to you, and I'm sure you've been seeing my hand floating in and out of the screen. And that's because it's part of my body language where I use my hands to emphasize. But for some persons, you want to be mindful of what are your tendencies in terms of your tone, and also in terms of, certain parts of speech that you tend to emphasize either with the use of flared nostril or narrowed eyes or squared shoulders. All of these can give impressions or be signals of, impressions. So I really want you to begin practice responding to certain concerns using active listening and positive body language, and also practicing what your tone of voice would be. And these are things that we can only master if we actually begin to practice it. So whether we practice it in the mirror or whether we practice it through training or looking at videos or actually doing simulations in, in branch activities as a family where we can practice some of these things, we are not going to actually have the experience of turning difficult conversations or communication into positive experiences for our members. So we do have to sort of be well practiced and be open to practicing, what is my tone? How can I use my tone for great impact? How can I use my body language, my eye contact, the words that I'm actually using, that they are not triggering, but they are more sort of facilitative. And as a final takeaway, as I move into the psychology of relationship building and the thinking behind your relationships and the purpose of each relationship, I want you to think about how do you combine your confidence with your product knowledge, your ability to communicate clearly with other elements of professionalism. That is how you dress, how you present yourself, your approach, your work ethic. All of these things actually come together to provide overall satisfaction. And I think one of the things that it's really important for us to realize that every time we improve as service professionals, every time we are able to respond with confidence, every time persons are able to see us and perceive that there is value in an interaction with us, then that leads to a positive experience. I know that when I call certain institutions, I prefer to speak to certain persons just because I have product knowledge, I have confidence, I have seamless, short, concise answers, and I can get to a solution really quickly. And those are the things that actually lead to member satisfaction. So in our platform, we have certain prompts that, we provide that can help you sort of, master the art of having sort of like an arsenal of responses that you can use in various circumstances and situations. These are really helpful because sometimes you may not necessarily have time to think through a challenge, but your experience can help, or having a prompt that is similar can help you to basically, okay, this is how I'm going to navigate this conversation. And I really want to encourage you to do some research and do further reading, because signals of professionalism will be transferred whether we recognize that we are transferring those signals or not. That takes me to understanding the purpose of our relationships. Not all relationships are equal, and I say that in this very safe space that, I have had friendships that have lasted like 20 plus years. I mean, these are lifelong friendships of persons that, we connected in primary school, we stayed connected throughout high school, and till today we are connected. And then there are other relationships where, those persons, they can be deeply influential, and they can perhaps maybe impact our leadership and our growth. But these relationships, sort of are like relationships that they don't last forever, but you can think of them as maybe like the vessels that sort of help shape our expertise, and they kind of move on. And whether your relationship is enduring or your relationship is fleeting, what I want you to realize is relationships, think about them as like the test. They are the testing ground. Sort of helping us to better understand, or I wouldn't even say understand, because sometimes things happen in relationships and you try to figure out, but what happened? What really happened there? And sometimes you really can't figure out what went wrong. But I do believe that these relationships, the experiences that we've had, whether it's a personal or professional relationship, they can really impact our lives. And so I want to believe that if we are better at navigating relationships, we kind of have a better human experience. And this human experience, one of the really cool theories I like is the social exchange theory. And I like to talk about this because I feel like it's the foundation of what relationships should really be about. If you are going to have a relationship, whether it's a personal or professional relationship, not only should that relationship have some benefits to you, but it must also have some benefit for the person who, yes, the person who perceived that there is some value there. So there has to be like value. You have to be able to receive, as also you have to be able to give. And that is basically what the social, exchange theory is. It basically is built on the foundation of mutual trust. Both parties will be able to thrive because similarly, both parties can receive a benefit. So if you are in a relationship where you give and you give and you give and you give and you give, what's going to happen? Albert, what's going to happen if you are in a relationship and you are giving and giving and giving and giving and there's no return? What's going to happen, Jalal, if you are in a relationship and you're giving and you're giving and you're giving and there's no return? John, what's going to happen? Tell us what's going to happen at that relationship.
Yeah, it's gonna go south. You're gonna give up eventually.
Why? Why is it going to go south?
Yeah,
When
because
you're
you
giving and
just feel
giving,
that
if
you're
it's not
just not
reciprocal.
getting anything.
Okay. What if you are getting something? What if you're getting more? What if you're on the receiving? What if you're getting the benefits? It might be different, right?
Well, my response would be exploit it for it too.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, the understanding is that we all enter into a relationship because we believe that there's some element of fulfillment in there, right? And that's why we really need to, as service professionals, be willing to apply EI, emotional intelligence, to the nature of how we strategically enter and position ourselves in relationships. And this emotional intelligence is something that we've all heard. It was conceptualized by Daniel Goleman, and basically Daniel is saying that emotional intelligence is so important because this is what is making relationships productive and meaningful. And if you're going to have a professional relationship, you're going to need EI, because the idea is that you want to build that relationship. At least you want to position yourself in that relationship so that you can recognize, you can understand, and you can manage your own emotions, while sometimes also influencing other persons, because ultimately you want to thrive. And that's where I think sometimes we get it wrong in professional relationships. When you come into a professional relationship, so if there's anyone who is perhaps not been at the credit union for 20 or 15 or 10 or 5 years or even 3 years, woohoo, the ball is in your court, because you have the opportunity now to be very strategic about how you approach your relationship building. So there are some things I want to tell you in terms of the key components of emotional intelligence and this social engagement theory. The first thing I want to point out is how you position yourself when it comes to self-awareness. Do you recognize and understand that your emotions can impact how you behave? And oftentimes, I mean, the majority of us, our human experiences are lived through our amygdala rather than our frontal cortex. I mean, most of us, that's why we are alive as human beings. We always think about what can happen, what if. And because of that, we are safe. That's why we have survived as humans. But the other thing about the amygdala is it can be very fear oriented. And I want us to be mindful that this connects our emotional elements so strongly to how we behave and how we think. And I want you to recognize that. So being very self-aware is one of the elements that I want you to be mindful of when you are in your professional relationship. Self-awareness. How do I navigate conflict? What is my predominant conflict style? What is my communication patterns? What am I likely to be like if I am disappointed? What am I likely to be like if I am asked to work under pressure? What am I likely to be like or show up? How am I likely to show up in my professional space when I'm exhausted or when I'm hungry? Like when I'm hungry, I don't go around people. I don't mess with people when I'm hungry, because when I'm hungry, I'm hungry. So I try not to show up in a professional space where I can lose my credibility over, food. So usually when I am in a social setting, I will eat before I go to a wedding. I will eat before I go to a party. If I'm coming for training, I am likely not to eat at that training, because when I'm angry, I'm hungry. My self-awareness, it can be skewed. So I recognize that and I've taken stock. There are lots of examples that I can give. Self-regulation is another element, controlling impulsive feelings and managing stress and adapting to changing circumstances. I know people say it's not always about what you say, it's about how you say it, but there are lots of us on here, like when we get angry, and those emotions start to buzz, and then we get that numb feeling that translates to a hot feeling, and then there's a separation. And you know what I mean? When you get hot, do you recognize that? If you recognize that in yourself, when you get angry and you get hot, and then you feel that separation, that is that emotional element taking over. And when you say you must give that person a piece of your mind, look, if you have been practicing giving people a piece of your mind, you better believe that you're giving away your power, because your mind is your power. And if you give me a piece of your mind, Jaleel, what do you think is going to happen? Chelsea, if I say something to you, I trigger you, and you give me a piece of your mind, what happens when you give somebody a piece of their mind?
Satisfaction. I feel some level of satisfaction.
You give them satisfaction. Why do you think you give them satisfaction? Do you think it's really?
I don't give them satisfaction. I feel some level of
Oh,
satisfaction.
you feel some level of satisfaction when you give them the piece of their mind, you're saying?
That's right.
Okay. Anybody else? When you give a piece of your mind, what you might feel at some level of satisfaction in that moment, but what ultimately are you also giving? Your power. So Jen said your power.
You give them control, really, over you.
You give them control, because what happens is you kind of have lost that self-regulation. So some barriers have, come down, and some level of control is lost. And you can tell when you're angry, because most times you lose control. You're not very good at self-regulating. And that's why most times when you give someone a piece of your mind, you literally lose your mind. And sometimes when people tell you what you said, you really cannot remember, because the impulsive feelings took over. You were not able to manage your stress level. And in those circumstances, basically, you said what came, you can say, to mind, but really and truly your mind was not very present at that time, because you were busy handing over your mind. So every time you think about a professional setting and how you should be navigating your relationships, self-regulation is something that you're going to have to master the art of, to be able to accelerate. That's why you see sometimes very simple things can go from 0 to 100 really quickly. So yesterday's session, we spoke about the situation where the member was upset. On his way out, he met emo news that went viral. And the next thing we knew, rather than just having had a situation where we gave a member information, we now have a whole PR fallout happening. So self-regulation, motivation. Why is motivation part of the EI equation? Anybody wants to talk about the role of motivation? Why motivation? Why motivation? Okay, so motivation is also part of the equation. And the reason behind that is, while a lot of times motivation isn't something that lasts, and really most of us at the stage that we're at now should be moving from motivation to discipline. But oftentimes motivation is a really strong drive for persons to want to achieve some kind of goal, and motivation usually speaks to doing that with passion and resilience. And while oftentimes motivation isn't something that can sustain, for an extended period of time, maybe you would say within your first 3 years of a job, you would be very motivated to get certain things done. And after that, it would have to transition from motivation to discipline. But motivation is definitely part of EI, because there has to be something stronger than yourself. And whether it's your core values, that's your motivation. Whether it's the money, That's the motivation. Maybe it's the bills that you have to pay. That's your motivation. Maybe it's your spirituality. That's your motivation. Or you might just be on a personal journey where you're like, nope, nope, not today, Satan. Whatever the motivation is, the point is it's there as a driving force. And then under the EI equation, we have empathy, basically being able to understand and share the feelings of others and foster strong relationships with persons. I mean, I know that many of us have had persons who may not have been very empathetic to, the circumstances that we may have been going through. They may not have approached us with grace. And we remember that. We know when persons come to us, there are times when there's a lot of unseen and unheard or unspoken reasons behind why they're doing what they're doing. So I really want to encourage you, you never know. While I do not know where you're at on your journey, you also never really know where somebody might be on their journey. So I want you to, offer some grace and try to foster, that spirit of, how can I be something for someone. I know a lot of our times persons say, as service professionals, we work so hard, and sometimes people don't acknowledge. And while people may not always acknowledge, I think the large majority of people are very thankful when they come to you and they get a service and you provide support. And finally, navigating social circumstances and situations effectively and building meaningful connections. I mean, there are a number of things and lessons that I really want to share with you in terms of how to strategize your social networking. There's a theory that Noel Birch developed, and this is the theory of the 4 levels of competence. And I think it's really important that at this stage that every individual should be aware of how competent or incompetent they are at doing something. But sometimes people, we, I'm in that category, we can be very unconsciously, whether we choose to be conscious or unconscious, but we can be very unaware of our lack of knowledge or skills in a specific area. So, and that might cause that person to operate under false confidence. So, like me in 2024, I discovered that I am not superwoman. You might have been able to tell me that, but I had to learn the hard way that sometimes we just have to say no. There's only 24 hours in the day, and you cannot be here and there and somewhere else because you're not Jesus Christ. And I would liken it to entrepreneurs who they might assume that they've done enough networking, and they've met enough people, and they understand all of the nuances of value exchange and how they should engage persons, but they can still violate those laws unconsciously. So for example, the example that I gave you before, where I was in this environment because I had a trusted relationship with one individual, in a whole framework, in a whole network, I violated one element of trust. Yes, which is so scarce in certain environments, particularly in an environment where I said to you it was an environment where these persons were high performance service professionals, very high paced environment. And it's important that you use your observation while you are working with your colleague. You might perceive that that something, you are in the know about something, and you might be totally unconsciously incompetent. And when you violate that fundamental law of professional engagement, there will be consequences. You cannot say, I didn't know. So don't be a casualty of that like I was. Just walk the talk and walk that line of, professionalism. So if you also interact with persons and you realize that they are unconsciously incompetent at a task or a skill. So here's one way that you can overcome this if you realize that maybe that has been something that you've battled with. One of the greatest things that you can do is seek feedback. I mean, I said it before that you must always be willing to get feedback from mentors and coaches because they are really good at highlighting our blind spots. And while we don't always like to hear that nobody who is, and I don't think anybody here likes to suck at something. Nobody likes to be a failure. But when you hear from persons who have been there and done that, who are coaches, who are mentors, who have been successful, you basically feel, okay, you know what? This is a credible source. So seek feedback from, credible mentors or persons who have been in a similar circumstance or situation, and they can provide you with feedback. The other thing is increase your exposure. Network, not only for meeting people, but read, research, do courses, invest. I mean, some of us, unless we are forced to, we won't invest in professional development because we don't see it as relevant. So I'm asking you to seek to increase your exposure and then adopt a learning mindset. And I remember there was a time I was saying, I think I've done enough studies. I've done my first degree. I've done my master's. And nobody needs to do a doctorate. But, in the world that we're living right now, we need to acknowledge that there's going to be more to learn and more to be open about and grow towards. So I really want to encourage you that you just keep an open mindset when it comes to learning and relearning. Sometimes, and there's one of the questions that I asked at our training, who's responsible for delivering customer service? Whether it's great customer service or poor customer service. Many of us said and argued that the state of customer service is bad. So if the state of customer service is bad, who is responsible for delivering bad customer service? And I leave it there. Yeah. So let's see if we can adopt that model of being used to being reintroduced to concepts. So while you might have been introduced once, twice, or 3 times, you can be reintroduced to something. And then we move on to the conscious incompetence. Now, what you don't know, you are conscious that you don't know. And at this stage, when this individual becomes aware, or if you become aware that you have a knowledge gap, and you begin to understand that there needs to be improvement, you can invest in learning. You can practice your self-awareness by continuing to be observant. And then, of course, you can begin to exercise emotional intelligence and exercise your EI muscles. And that's something that's the only way that you can move out of, incompetence to competence. And the first hurdle is knowing, and at least you are conscious of it. There are some persons who are conscious that they are competent, so they can do it. But it takes them efforts to be able to do and show up as a professional. And I really want to encourage you to apply that effort and don't become weary in your well-doing. Sometimes you might deliberately decide, you've done it. You know all that's in it. I've done. I remember once trying to tell my grandfather, who was very sick and who we were sure was going to pass away. I was trying to tell him, about Jesus and if he'd given his life to Christ. And he told me, "Puss, Papa know all that already. I've been here a long time ago." And he died at 98. Tell me, "Papa know all that already. All that I've done all that before." And I really deliberately wanted to know like what he meant by he'd done all that before. So sometimes we really need to deliberately apply what we've learned and to be consistent. And that's where we really need, after we've gotten to motivation, we really need to get to discipline. And then some of the useful things that I encourage you to do is always trying to utilize some kind of framework or model to keep you on your toe. So for example, how do we leverage our relationships? And one of the best things that we can take into account is how can we think about the needs of the various stakeholders and the various people that we're interacting with, and how what we know and what we do can bring value for them. Finally, soliciting feedback and refining those skills. I remember I spoke to some of us, we are where we are because we have failed to refine. And while you might be really good at what you do, persons need to be constantly finding value in what you do. So that means that you're going to have to be rebranding yourself. Yes, the George of yesterday, the George of today, and the George of tomorrow. You always have to think about how am I accelerating and how am I showing up as a professional, because there will be seasons and you need to be able to continually refine your interpersonal skills, your soft skills. And then, of course, some of us are unconsciously competent. It comes naturally. And basically, the way that we sustain our competence, like I said before, is to refine, be innovative, work with mentors, and maintain humility. You know, sometimes we can become a little bit closed off. And again, that speaks to the wariness that we can feel. So we might feel that things are changing really quickly. We just did a corporate plan. We just did some new initiatives, community drive. Now we're doing MSc. And sometimes that's just the nature of business. And that's just the nature of how things are flowing in our economy. And it's really important as service professionals to not sort of get lost in that processing. So I really want to encourage you, especially as you leave this Friday to head into the weekend, make sure you spend some time to refresh, because professional burnout is a real thing. All right. Some key takeaways that I want to be able to share with you in terms of building your relationships, and how to better position yourself as a professional. Look, every professional, I don't care where you are at, everybody starts off by being unconscious incompetence. And you, when you are in that phase, the best thing that you can do to accelerate out of that phase is to embrace the learning process. So when you first step into a role, take time and observe. Take time and take notes. Even if you are working with the same people and you are stepping up into a new role, or you want to step across into a new role, you're going to experience some kind of new kid on the block where you will be professionally incompetent. And some of those things you might be unconsciously incompetent about because you don't know the culture, you don't know the specifics of the task, you might not understand the KPIs related to that specific, those specific processes. So you will be incompetent. So take time to observe and to actively take notes. The other thing is, it can be that being incompetent at something, if you're unconsciously incompetent, you don't feel embarrassed about it. But when you become conscious that you're incompetent about something, this might be the most uncomfortable place for you to be. But it's also the most transformational, because here you begin to evolve. And that's when you can take stock of the things that are happening around you. And that's where you begin to challenge yourself. And sometimes, if you have a really good leader, they will challenge you. When you are leading, and if there are leaders or supervisors on this call, I can tell you from my personal experience as an entrepreneur, that's one of the things that I've struggled with the most. You hire persons to help you with a vision, And sometimes they are asked to help build the processes and the procedures and the systems. And they can be really great, and sometimes they are not very good. But when you find someone who's really good at like 8 out of 10 things, and they're not so good at maybe 1.5 things or even one thing, you ask yourself, Nanasha, you sure you want to be petty? You sure you really want to point out that one little thing that that person isn't, yet competent at? And my answer to you is yes. You want to do that with professionalism. You see, some of us, what has become misguided in our spaces is that we can be very insulting of persons, or we can approach feedback in a way that we can end up discouraging or weaponizing. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to provide a script, provide a checklist to someone. Once you've provided that checklist to someone, you want to be able to sit with that person so that they can begin to duplicate, yes, that checklist, validate and duplicate that checklist, and keep repeating it and doing it again and again. But someone cannot duplicate something that is incorrect. So what you want to be able to do is provide them with the consciousness of, hey, I realize that you've been putting in a lot of effort. I want to sit with you and show you these are the things that can really get us to 10. And then you sit with that person and focus on the process, the checklist, the way that this task or this activity could bring all of us more value. You see, people genuinely want to have an opportunity to learn and to get feedback. But most times, all of us might know that this one specific person, their etiquette is not on point, or they suck at something, and none of us tell that person. And everybody's complaining at that thing that that person is doing that's so annoying, and no one is taking the time to share that with that one person. So the real help that the person can get to change the habits that's really annoying is the thing that nobody wants to tell them about. So when you become conscious that you're incompetent at something, while it's uncomfortable, it's really evolution, because what's after that is conscious competence, it's mastery. And that's when you begin to practice with intention, because you know your stuff, you know your drill. And then you can start to stay disciplined, because you can master your task at various levels, and that will unfold as you accelerate through your career. Yes. Now, when you're unconsciously competent, and you are trying to grow, you might not know that you are natural at something, and everybody's like, you're so good at this comes so naturally, but you really want to grow. I think one of the best things is you start by understanding where you're at in this framework of conscious or unconscious competence, and you can strategically begin to improve, your personal relationships or accelerate in your career. And there are some things that are a must when you are engaging at every single level of this competence structure. Always observe and learn, and spend time observing, ensuring that, you don't want to come in making a whole set of suggestions to a system that you don't understand. At each stage, you want to extract key lessons, take those key lessons and learn and apply that strategically, so that you can begin to establish, those relationship models. And this will really help you to navigate your relationships a little bit more strategically, because this is where you begin to strategically position yourself, so that you are starting off on a framework of trust. You are then moving to how you can elevate your different leadership styles. And that strategy is important. professional relationships are usually built on mutual goals. So usually there will be KPIs or performance expectations tied maybe to the organization's success that will be set and established for you as a goal. Now, your interactions within the dynamics of that relationship is to prove that you have intentionally focused on your productivity, your collaboration with others, and maintaining and supporting a work environment. Oftentimes, we forget that in a professional relationship, there's always this tie to performance. Don't forget that. In a personal relationship, it's usually rooted by the vibe, the connection, the emotion, yes, shared experiences, and personal growth. And that dynamic is a little bit more flexible. There's more room for emotional vulnerability and personal investment than in our professional relationships. And while I'm encouraging you to be invested in your relationships, professional relationships, that is, I really want you to be a little bit more strategic in the communication style that you choose, setting certain emotional boundaries, and ensuring that the boundaries about emotional involvement. So maintaining emotional boundaries mean that you keep those interactions appropriate, avoid oversharing. Is somebody here listening? Some of us share TMI information, and then we want to go back and say, I wish I had not. So please ensure that we are also mindful of the rules of hierarchy within the organization. You know, sometimes we feel that there are persons who might be leading us, and for whatever reason, we feel that they're not worthy of it. You know, we need to be mindful that within our organization, there'll always be some kind of hierarchy and role distribution. So please apply and manage your professional relationships so that you can prevent conflict from escalating, either because you were inappropriate in your interaction, you were oversharing, or you were just not mindful of the fact that your professional relationship, you know, is less about flexibility and more about you trying to, you know, stick to the confines of, you know, making sure we have operational success. In terms of conflicts and how we handle conflicts with professional relationships, you know, in a professional setting, we should approach objectivity in how we, you know, relate to others and be more solution oriented. I feel that oftentimes we forget that, and we hold on so much to the emotional connection that we've made to that person. And it becomes very difficult for some of us within the workplace setting, especially when we're confronted with policies. We become very uncomfortable because we confuse a professional and personal relationship. And then trust and, you know, dependability. Trust is built through your reliability in a professional setting. Trust is built through your consistency. And trust is built through your competence in delivering results. My brother and my sisters, I am so sorry to tell you, professionalism, it dictates dependability is measured in terms of performance and accountability. So if you have challenges with being accountable, if you didn't dot the T, it's an L. And you have to be accountable for that L presenting as a T or that T presenting as an L. So just be mindful that with a professional relationship, you know, while you may have established, it may have been established emotional trust, oftentimes you find in a personal relationship, because you choose those relationships, you often have shared values. So you might be the same religion, you might have come from the same community, the same background, you know, you understand hustle, or you understand, you know, people going to church on Sunday, or you understand a good carnival life, or you prefer to be at carnival camp. The point is, our professional relationships, while yes, we might celebrate birthdays and weddings and births of children, our professional relationships are really more about our consistency, reliability, and our competence and delivering results. Finally, I just want to touch on long-term value and how we can sustain our professional relationships long-term. I think the truth about a professional relationship is that these are often transactional. And that's why I prefer with my professional relationships to enter my professional relationships very strategically so that over time they have all contributed to my career growth. So I have the first professional relationship that, senior manager gave me a reference for my second job, and my second job for my third job, and my third job for my fourth job. And that's just how I have, approached my professional relationships. Very organized, very much about mutual benefits, not only for me, and encouraging you to seek opportunities to develop your CV and seek opportunities, to have an open relationship where your supervisor is aware of certain correct goals. And that is within the bounds of your role and what is expected of you within your role, and foster collaboration. And that's the key to a professional relationship. And for your relationships on a personal level, they are a little bit different. You want to thrive with deep connections and shared experiences. And oftentimes that's why we stay with people, even when they tell you that you and that person are still friends. It's because you have shared experiences, you've evolved together, and you have so much emotional investment. And if those persons are consistent and those feelings are mutual, those personal relationships will last. As I end my conversation on you just being a little strategic, especially with, I would say, the changes that will happen within your physical space, there is a need for us to be a little bit more appreciative that we change over time. And this requires us to be very self-aware and very strategically engaged, but also emotionally intelligent. And I want you to, one, understand the dynamics of what your professional relationship really is, what it means to you, and to really apply competence model that intentionally helps you to accelerate in your professional career. I'm also asking you to position yourself for long-term success in any career, not because I have always said that, change is something that is inevitable. And while I wish you all of the best of luck in your current relationship with your employer, I also recognize that from time to time, things can change for us. We may travel, we may seek, a different role. Anything can happen. We can be promoted, we can be moved across. I really want you to always be strategically accelerating towards, what is going to have the best sort of experience for you to thrive and to grow and to have a healthy professional relationship, but also to have a one that is about success. So with that, I will bring my masterclass to an end because I want to be able to answer any questions that you have. I'm hoping that the information here was relevant and is something that you feel that can be applied. Maybe some of us need to draw that line between our professional and personal relationships. Just that line of understanding what is the purpose, understanding how we are communicating, understanding what emotional boundaries we are setting, understanding how we are resolving conflicts within the dynamics of our personal and professional relationships. Okay, so I will pause to just allow for us to ask any questions that we may have, or to provide feedback, or to seek further clarification as needed. Are there any questions? Well, I see that I don't know if you are unmuted or that's just your mic may have been unmuted all along. Is it that you have a question? Okay, so on this note, I am taking it that we have no additional questions. And I'm going to thank each and every one of you for showing up. I think I have 19 of you. I didn't realize I wasn't taking a note. I think when we started, there were 7 of us. So I really didn't realize we had grown to 19. So I want to thank you. Today's a very busy day for most of you. So it's happy Friday. Or Friday. Some of us, it's either starting or ending. So I'm just going to encourage you to have a very restful and productive, fun weekend off from work, and we will continue in the week ahead. If there are questions regarding access to some of the content, someone hinted that their Unit 4, which is the psychology of relationship, the video is not in there. So I will check on that and make sure that that is uploaded. I will also ensure that this video for this session, well, it's going to be a pre-recorded, which will be different because there will be a presentation, but this will also be placed onto the platform for those who missed and wanted to see what happened at today's masterclass. All right, so again, thank you to each and every one of you. And I didn't see any questions or any raised hands. So I'm going to take it that you are good and we are headed out of the office to enjoy our Fridays. Thank you so much. Until we connect again, I'm saying goodbye. This is Natasha signing off and saying again, happy Friday to each and every one of you.
Happy Friday, happy weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.